How to get rich using the system against them. Here's the number. The financial industry does not want you to calculate 3.4%. That's it. 3.4 percentage points. Sounds like noise. Sounds like rounding error. But I'm going to show you, inside the next few minutes, that 3.4% is the exact size of the gap between what the stock market actually returned over the last 20 years and what the average American investor actually kept. And the difference between those two numbers, in real dollars, on a $300,000 base, is $1 million. Not lost to a bad company, not lost to fraud, not lost to a crash, lost to a system that was specifically designed to make you do the wrong thing at the wrong moment and call it good advice. I want to start with something you've probably felt and never had a name for. You did the research, you opened the account, you set up the contributions, you watched the market go up and you watched it go down, and you stayed in, or mostly stayed in, because every article and every advisor and every financial podcast told you that staying in was the right move. And then one day you pulled up the actual numbers, your actual numbers, and the math didn't add up the way the charts promised. The account was growing, yes, but it felt like it was growing for someone else. Like the big money was landing somewhere just slightly out of reach. Like you were following all the rules of a game that was built so the house wins regardless. That feeling is not irrational. That feeling is data. And today I'm going to show you exactly why it's been happening, name the mechanism behind it, and give you the one structural decision that closes the gap permanently without requiring you to become a different person or find a different market. Here's the image I want you to hold for this entire video, because I'm going to come back to it multiple times, and it explains almost everything. Think about a vending machine. Not a metaphor for patience, not a lesson about waiting for your snack. A literal vending machine with a mechanical malfunction. You put in the money, you press the button. The machine makes all the right sounds. The coil turns. And then the snack gets stuck. It's right there. You can see it. One more nudge and it falls. But if you reach in and shake the machine at the wrong moment, you can lose everything. Get banned from the building, tip the machine, hurt yourself. The snack falls on its own if you just wait the extra 15 seconds. The people who got rich in the last 30 years of American market history were almost entirely the people who did not shake the machine. They were not smarter. They did not find better stocks. They just didn't reach in. The people who lost weren't stupid either. The system told them to reach in. The system handed them a financial news channel, a market correction, a quarter of bad earnings, and a very reasonable-sounding advisor who said, given current conditions, it might be time to rebalance. They reached in. The snack fell for someone else. Now let me put concrete numbers on this because I promised I would prove this with math and I keep my promises. These figures use data from Dalbar's Quantitative Analysis of Investor Behavior, published annually since 1994, 30 straight years of tracking the gap between market returns and what actual investors captured. I'm using their most recent 20-year window, which is the cleanest long-term picture available. All returns are annualized. Over the 20-year period ending in 2023, the S&P 500 returned 10.2% annually. The average equity fund investor returned 6.8% annually. That 3.4% gap, not fees, not inflation, just behavior, compounds into this table. Watch what one variable does. $300,000, invested for 20 years at 10.2%. Final balance, approximately $2,100,000. Same $300,000, same 20 years, at 6.8%. Final balance, approximately $1,100,000. Same starting amount, same time frame, same index funds. The only variable was what the investor did during market corrections. The gap is $1 million. $1 million generated by doing nothing differently except not doing the thing the system pressured you to do during the 4 or 5 genuinely scary moments in that 20-year window. This is not a small number. This is the difference between a retirement and a part-time job into your 70s. And almost nobody in mainstream financial media will tell you this clearly, because the system that generates that gap, the panic, the rebalancing calls, the given current conditions pivots, is also the system that pays for the advertising on the shows that cover it. Let me introduce someone I'll come back to throughout this video. His name is Daniel. He's 51 years old. He works as a regional operations manager for a logistics company in the Midwest. He earns $94,000 a year. He has been contributing consistently to a 401k since he was 33. He has never missed a contribution. He has never made a dramatic stock pick. He has a financial advisor he trusts, named someone he met at a Chamber of Commerce event, who manages a diversified portfolio and sends him a quarterly report with charts he half reads. His current 401k balance is approximately $230,000. By every standard you can find in a personal finance article, Daniel is doing it right. He is also, right now, sitting almost $800,000 below where he should be. And the advisor who helped him get there is still charging 1% per year for the privilege. We'll come back to Daniel. His situation has a very specific resolution that requires understanding everything I'm about to walk you through. Here's the anti-diagnosis, and this is the part that's going to land differently than anything else in this video. You think the problem is the market. You think volatility is the enemy. You think the problem is that bad years wipe out good years and you just need to ride it out. That's what every piece of financial content tells you. Stay the course. Don't panic. Time in the market beats timing the market. All of that is true, but none of it explains why the gap exists. If the advice to stay the course is everywhere and correct, why does the gap between market returns and investor returns persist at 3.4% for 30 straight years of data? Why hasn't widespread access to that advice closed the gap? Here's why. The problem isn't that people don't know they should stay calm. The problem is that the entire architecture of how financial information reaches you is optimized to make staying calm structurally impossible at the exact moment it matters most. Think about that for 1 second. The news cycle accelerates during market downturns. The financial apps send push notifications when your portfolio drops. The advisor calls to discuss current conditions in down months, not up months. The very infrastructure of information delivery is tuned to produce maximum emotional activation at maximum financial fragility. You don't need better willpower, you need a different architecture. And there are 3 specific structural failures that drain the average investor of their $1 million, almost always in the same order, almost always for the same reasons. That's what the rest of this video is about. But first, subscribe. I know everyone says that. I'm saying it now because the next 2 parts of this video are going to get into territory that mainstream financial channels do not touch, and the only way YouTube shows you those parts is if you're subscribed and engaged. Hit the button. Then let's go deeper. The first structural failure is the visibility trap. And it is not a personality flaw. It is the predictable output of a system engineered to generate engagement, which means it is engineered to generate fear, because fear generates clicks. Fear generates shares. Fear generates the kind of compulsive checking behavior that turns a long-term investment account into something that feels like it needs to be actively managed every single week. Here is what Dalbar's research actually shows about the timing of investor mistakes. The biggest single-year underperformance gaps between market return and investor return consistently cluster around the same type of event. A market drop of 15% or more followed by a recovery within 12 to 18 months. The market drops. Investors sell or reduce contributions, statistically proven, measurable, consistent. The market recovers. Investors buy back in after the recovery is already priced in. The snack falls. Someone else's snack. This is not a story about a few panicking people dragging down the average. This is the median behavior. More than half of equity fund investors made at least one significant timing error in the 20-year window Dalbar tracked. The gap is not an outlier result. It is the expected output of a system that gives people real-time access to portfolio values during events specifically designed by news infrastructure to feel like emergencies. The solution is not to check less as a matter of willpower. The solution is to structurally remove the feedback loop, and I'll give you the exact mechanism for that in the next block. But first I need you to understand the second structural failure because it's the quieter one, and it's been silently redirecting your returns for the entire time you've been invested, probably without your knowledge and almost certainly without your consent. The second structural failure is the fee extraction engine. And I want to be precise about this because the fee conversation in personal finance has been so thoroughly dumbed down that most people think they've already solved it. I use index funds. My expense ratio is low. I'm fine. Maybe. But here's what that framing misses. And here's why Daniel, 51, $94,000 a year, $230,000 saved, is sitting on a problem he doesn't know he has. Morningstar's 2024 fund fee study found that the average expense ratio for an actively managed U.S. equity mutual fund is approximately 1.0%. Many run between 1.2 and 1.5. If Daniel's advisor, the Chamber of Commerce guy charging 1% of assets under management, has him in a mix of funds with a blended expense ratio of 0.8%, Daniel's total annual cost is approximately 1.8% per year, every year. Whether the market goes up or down, whether the advice was correct or not, whether Daniel even looked at the quarterly report or filed it under things to deal with later. 1.8% extracted automatically, invisibly, before the number on the statement is calculated. Here's what that number does to Daniel specifically. He has $230,000 invested. He has 14 years until age 65. At a 10% gross return minus 1.8% in total annual costs, Daniel's net return is approximately 8.2%. Over 14 years, his $230,000 grows to approximately $715,000. Now move those same $230,000 today into a Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. Expense ratio, 0.03%. No advisor fee, just the fund running on its own. Net return essentially 10%, same 14 years. Final balance, approximately $890,000. The cost of 1.77 percentage points in annual fees compounded over 14 years is $175,000. $175,000 redirected from Daniel's retirement account to a fee structure. For what exactly? For a service that, at its core, is not trading, not timing the market, not finding alpha. The core service is holding a diversified portfolio and not touching it. The same thing the index fund does for $3 per $10,000 invested per year versus $180. I want to be direct here and I want to be fair. There are financial advisors doing genuinely valuable work. Tax planning, estate structure, Social Security timing optimization, insurance gap analysis, coordinating a Roth conversion ladder across multiple account types in a specific tax year. That is specialized, irreplaceable, valuable work that is worth paying for. But if the primary deliverable is, I built you a diversified portfolio and I rebalance it once a year, you are paying between $40,000 and $100,000 over the course of a 20 to 30-year relationship for something a Vanguard account does in 4 clicks and $0. The system is not designed to make this math visible to you. The system is designed to make the relationship feel necessary. The advisor calls in down markets. That's reassurance, and it feels valuable in the moment. The quarterly report with the charts communicates competence. The credential wall in the office communicates authority. None of that changes the arithmetic. Now here's the part that compounds the fee problem. Literally. The fee extraction is not just the fee itself. It's the compounding that fee was supposed to generate and didn't. A 1.8% annual drag on a $230,000 portfolio in year 1 cost Daniel approximately $4,140. That sounds manageable. But that $4,000 is not just gone. It's gone from the base that would have compounded for the next 13 years at 10%. That single year's fee drag has a future value of approximately $14,000 at retirement. Multiply that across every year of the relationship, and you start to understand why the total cost is not the sum of the fees. It's the sum of the compounding those fees were supposed to generate and didn't. The system designed a product that extracts from your second employee's paycheck every single week before you see the stub. Now I need to introduce the third structural failure, and this one is the most invisible because it operates inside the tax code, which most people have been told is too complicated to understand, which is exactly why nobody explained it to them, which is exactly why it keeps working. The tax drag problem sits underneath the fee problem, and together they are what turns a theoretical 10% return into the 6.8% that Dalbar measures in actual investor accounts. Not because the funds performed poorly, because a meaningful chunk of the return was redirected before it ever had a chance to compound. Here's the mechanism. In a taxable brokerage account, the kind that roughly 40% of individual investors hold alongside their 401k, according to Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finance's data, Mutual funds and ETFs generate dividends and capital gains distributions every year. Those distributions are taxable as ordinary income in the year they're received, whether or not you sold anything, whether or not you even knew the distribution happened. If your fund has a turnover ratio of 50%, meaning it bought and sold half its holdings in the course of the year, it generated taxable events inside the fund that flow through to your tax return. The average actively managed U.S. equity fund has a turnover ratio of approximately 60 to 80%, according to Morningstar's portfolio analytics data. You didn't trade. The fund traded. You paid the taxes. Every year. This annual tax drag reduces your effective return from 10% to somewhere between 7.5 and 8.5%, depending on your bracket and your fund's specific behavior. That gap, 1.5 to 2.5% per year, is not a market problem. It is a structural design feature of the product you were sold. The most tax-efficient structure is not complicated. It is a low-turnover index fund inside a tax-advantaged account. The after-tax return of that structure versus an actively managed fund in a taxable account on a $200,000 base over 20 years is between $300,000 and $500,000. Not complicated, just not widely explained, because explaining it costs the industry money. Let me bring Daniel back. 51 years old, $94,000 a year, $230,000 saved across a 401k and a taxable brokerage account he opened during 2020 because the market swings made him feel like he needed to be closer to the action. The 401k is with his employer plan. Decent selection, advisor managing allocation. The brokerage account has about $38,000 in it, sitting in 3 actively managed funds his advisor recommended for additional diversification. Those 3 funds have an average expense ratio of 1.1% and an average turnover ratio of 73%. Daniel is right now paying fees on both ends, the 1% AUM on total assets and the fund level fees on top, while generating an annual tax bill he doesn't fully understand on an account he barely checks. Here's Daniel's actual retirement picture if nothing changes. His 401k balance of $192,000, growing at 8.2% net of fees for 14 years, approximately $580,000. His taxable account of $38,000, growing at approximately 7.8% net of fees and tax drag for 14 years, approximately $110,000. Total at 65, approximately $690,000. The number most Americans say they need for a comfortable retirement, according to Northwestern Mutual's 2026 Planning and Progress study, is $1.46 million. Daniel's gap is approximately $770,000 on a salary of $94,000 a year, with 18 years of consistent contributions behind him, with a professional managing his money. The system did not fail Daniel dramatically. It failed him structurally, quietly, over time, in amounts too small to notice in any single year, totaling nearly $800,000 by the time the damage becomes visible. And here's the part that should make you genuinely angry on Daniel's behalf. None of this required bad markets. None of it required bad decisions in the panic sense. It required only the standard product, the standard advisor relationship, the standard fee structure, and the standard tax treatment of the standard account type, all of which the system presents as normal, correct, and responsible. The treadmill ran at full speed and Daniel paid for the electricity. Now, and this is where the video shifts from diagnosis to solution, I want to show you what happens to Daniel's numbers when 3 specific structural changes are made. Not lifestyle changes, not contribution discipline changes, architecture changes, changes to the design of the system itself so that the correct financial decision executes automatically without requiring Daniel to be a different person in moments of market stress. Because if the problem is structural, the solution has to be structural. Willpower is not a retirement plan. Subscribe if you haven't yet. The next block is where the actual mechanics live, and the 3 actions I'm going to give you are calibrated specifically for someone in Daniel's position, mid-career, real money on the table, no time to waste on strategies that work in theory, but require extraordinary behavior to execute. The reason the 3.4% gap has persisted for 30 straight years is not that investors keep making the same emotional mistake and nobody has thought to explain the solution. The explanation has been available the whole time. The gap persists because the architecture of the system reliably produces it. You cannot outperform a system that is designed to extract from you by trying harder inside the same system. You have to change the system you're running on. And that is a very different project than the one most personal finance content describes. Here are the 3 structural changes. Not tips, not habits. Architecture. The difference matters because habits require daily redecisions, and architecture requires one decision that then runs on its own. Every solution I give you here is designed so that after the initial setup, the correct financial behavior happens automatically, without you having to be disciplined, vigilant, or emotionally steady during a market downturn. Because you will not be emotionally steady during a market downturn. Nobody is. The system is designed to make sure of that. The goal is to build a structure where your emotional state during a crash is financially irrelevant. The first structural change is what I call the visibility firewall, and the mechanism behind it comes from research by Shlomo Benartzi and Richard Thaler. The behavioral economists whose work on automatic enrollment showed that the single most powerful predictor of retirement saving behavior is not financial literacy, not income level, and not motivation. It is the default. Whatever the system does automatically when no decision is made is what most people end up doing. Their research, which contributed to Thaler's Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017, showed that switching 401k enrollment from opt-in to opt-out increased participation rates from roughly 67% to over 90% without changing anything else about the plan, the contribution rate, or the available options. The default is the decision for most people most of the time, which means the most powerful financial move available to you right now is not finding a better fund. It is changing your default behavior during a market event from "can see portfolio value in real time and act on it" to "portfolio value is not visible in a format that triggers action." Here is the specific mechanism. Log into every investment account you own. Find the notification settings. Turn off all push notifications related to portfolio value, daily performance, and market movement. All of them. This is not an invitation to ignorance. It is a recognition that real-time portfolio visibility during a market event serves the brokerage's engagement metrics, not your retirement balance. The Dalbar data shows that the average equity investor underperforms by 3.4% annually. Fidelity's internal data, which the company has referenced in several investor education publications, found that their best-performing accounts over multi-decade windows were disproportionately accounts where the account holder had either forgotten the account existed or died. The accounts that performed best were the ones where no human was watching. That is not an accident. That is the vending machine left alone long enough for the snack to fall. You don't need to forget your account exists. You need to structurally replicate the behavior of someone who forgot. Automated contributions, no real-time alerts, quarterly or semi-annual review on a calendar you control, not a push notification the app sends when volatility spikes. One login, 3 changes in notification settings. That is the entire action. And according to behavioral finance research from the University of California, Berkeley by Terrence Odian and Brad Barber, tracking 66,000 individual brokerage accounts over 6 years in the 90s, the least active accounts, the ones with the fewest logins and the fewest trades, nearly matched the full market return. The most active accounts underperformed by 6.5% annually. Activity is the enemy. The firewall's job is to make inactivity the path of least resistance. The second structural change is the fee audit and migration. And I want to give you the exact steps because check your fees is advice everyone has heard and almost nobody has acted on, which means the framing is wrong. The correct framing is, you are almost certainly paying between $40,000 and $150,000 in unnecessary fees over the remainder of your investing life, and the transfer takes approximately 45 minutes and 1 phone call. Here's the specific sequence. Step 1. Log into every investment account and find the expense ratio for each fund you hold. This number is listed in the fund details section of every brokerage platform. It is labeled expense ratio or net expense ratio and expressed as a percentage. Write down the number for each fund. Step 2. Add up your total annual fee cost. Multiply each fund's expense ratio by its balance, add those numbers together, then add your advisor fee if you have one. Typically 1% of total assets under management. That total is what you are paying per year in fee drag. Step 3. Compare that number to the cost of a Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, ticker VTSAX, expense ratio 0.04%, or the equivalent at Fidelity. There's zero expense ratio total market index fund. The arithmetic will show you the specific dollar gap. Step 4. If the gap is above $500 per year, and for most people with balances over $50,000 it will be, initiate a transfer. At most brokerages, this is a form you fill out online. The new account pulls the assets from the old one. You do not have to sell and rebuy in most cases. The process takes 7 to 10 business days. After that, the structural change is permanent and it compounds in your favor every single year for the rest of your investing life without any further action from you. One clarification that matters. If your advisor provides tax planning, estate coordination, Social Security timing analysis, or Roth conversion strategy, services that require specific expertise and have measurable dollar impact on your retirement, that relationship may be worth the cost. Get a clear written accounting of every service provided and its estimated value. If the list is specific and the dollar value is real, pay for it and keep the relationship. If the list is diversified portfolio, rebalancing, and access to call me during market corrections, that's the vending machine with a middleman standing in front of it, charging you to not shake it. You can handle that yourself. The third structural change is what I call the sequence buffer, and this one is specifically for anyone within 10 years of retirement, which includes Daniel at 51. Because the math between now and retirement is different from the math after retirement, and the single most dangerous structural gap in most retirement plans is that the transition between those two phases is treated as a date on a calendar rather than an architecture problem that needs to be solved in advance. Here is the mechanism. Sequence of returns risk, the danger that a major market downturn in your first 3 years of retirement forces you to sell depreciating assets to fund living expenses, permanently depleting the base that would otherwise recover, is the specific failure mode that causes retirement plans to run out of money even when the lifetime average return was perfectly adequate. Two investors, identical in every measurable way. Same balance, same withdrawal rate, same lifetime average return. If investor 1 hits a 30% downturn in years 1 and 2 of retirement, they run out of money between year 14 and year 17. If investor 2 hits the same 30% downturn in years 23 and 24, near the end of life, they die with over $800,000 still in the account. The only variable is when the bad sequence hit. This is not speculative. This is the arithmetic of William Bengen's original 4% research published in the Journal of Financial Planning in 1994, which the financial media then stripped of its caveats and handed to millions of retirees as a static rule without explaining that it only holds under specific sequence conditions. The practical solution is a cash buffer, 1 to 2 years of living expenses held in short-term bonds or a money market fund, built deliberately in the 3 to 5 years before your target retirement date. If the market drops 30% in your first year of retirement and you have a 2-year cash buffer, you live off the buffer. You do not touch the portfolio. You give the compounding engine time to recover before you start drawing on it. This is a decision that must be made before retirement, not reactively during one. Because the moment the market is already down and you're panicking is the worst possible moment to be designing a withdrawal architecture. Now let me close Daniel's story. Because he came in frustrated, and he deserves a specific resolution. Daniel is 51, $94,000 a year, $230,000 saved across his 401k and brokerage account, currently on track for approximately $690,000 at 65. Gap to the $1.46 million target, approximately $770,000. Here is what Daniel actually did. First, he ran the Fee Audit. Found that his blended annual cost, fund expense ratios plus advisor AUM fee, was 1.73% on a $230,000 portfolio. Annual fee drag, approximately $3,980 per year. He moved the taxable brokerage account, $38,000, into a Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. He contacted his 401k plan administrator and found that a comparable index fund was available inside his existing employer plan at 0.03% expense ratio, the same option that had been there for 6 years that nobody mentioned during onboarding. He switched his allocations inside the plan in one 20-minute session. He did not fire his advisor immediately. The advisor provides estate planning and Social Security optimization services that have a specific calculable value to Daniel's situation. He renegotiated the fee to 0.5% on assets under management for those specific services, eliminating the AUM charge on the portion of his portfolio that is passively managed index funds. Total fee reduction from 1.73% to approximately 0.38% on blended assets. The dollar impact of that single structural change over 14 years, approximately $160,000 in additional compounding. $160,000 from a conversation and 2 account changes. Second, Daniel turned off all push notifications on his brokerage apps. He set a calendar reminder for the first Sunday of every January to review allocations and rebalance if any asset class has drifted more than 5% from target. 11 months and 3 weeks per year, his portfolio runs without his input. The vending machine is not being shaken. Third, Daniel began building his sequence buffer. Starting at 51, he has 14 years to accumulate 1 to 2 years of projected retirement living expenses, approximately $60,000 to $90,000, in a money market fund inside his 401k. He directed 3% of each paycheck to this allocation specifically, building it gradually without disrupting his primary growth contributions. At 65, regardless of what the market is doing in that first year, Daniel has a runway. He does not have to sell anything at a low. He can let the second employee, his accumulated capital doing the compounding work, recover before he starts withdrawing. Daniel's revised projection at 65, with lower fees, no behavioral gap from reactive trading, and the sequence buffer in place, approximately $940,000 to $1 million from retirement accounts, plus home equity and Social Security. Not $1.46 million, but dramatically closer. And with a structure that does not rely on Daniel being disciplined, lucky, or calm during a crash. The architecture is doing the work. That is the entire game. Here are the 3 actions calibrated to where you are right now, not generic advice. Steps with a specific sequence and a specific time window, because the cost of delay is not abstract. Every month your fee structure stays at 1.7% instead of 0.04%, you lose approximately $140 per $100,000 invested, and that money will not compound for the next 14 years. First, this week, not this month. Log into every investment account and find the expense ratio for every fund you hold. Write the numbers down. Calculate your total annual fee cost in dollars. If that number is above $500 and you are not receiving specific measurable tax or estate planning services in return, research the cheapest index fund available inside your existing plan and initiate the switch. This decision, made today versus made 6 months from now, has a compounding impact you can calculate exactly using any free online compound interest calculator. The number will be large enough to make the delay feel genuinely expensive. Second, change your notification architecture before the next market event hits, not when the market is down. Right now, while everything is calm, while there is no pressure, while your emotional state is not going to override your rational one. Turn off the push alerts. Set the review calendar. Pre-commit to the rule. No allocation changes outside the scheduled annual review window except for the contribution rebalancing. Write the rule down. Put it where you will see it during a downturn, because the version of you that exists at peak market fear does not have access to the analytical clarity you have right now. Pre-deciding eliminates the decision from the high fear moment entirely. Third, calculate your sequence buffer target and start building it now, not at 60. The buffer is 1 to 2 years of projected retirement living expenses. If you plan to spend $60,000 a year in retirement, the buffer is $60,000 to $120,000 in short-term, low-volatility assets, a money market fund or short-term bond fund inside your tax-advantaged account. Start directing a small percentage of contributions toward this allocation today. It builds slowly and it will not feel significant for several years. But if the market drops 30% in your first year of retirement and you have it, it is the difference between a plan that survives and one that doesn't. The 3 structural failures, the visibility trap, the fee extraction engine, and the missing sequence buffer, have been costing the average American investor $1 million on a $300,000 base for 30 straight years of documented data. The market did not take that money. The structure did. And structure is the one thing you can actually change. The investors who came out ahead were not the ones who found better stocks or better timing or better advice. They were the ones who built a system where the correct behavior happened automatically, where the vending machine was left alone long enough for the snack to fall, and where the gap between what the market returned and what they actually kept was closed not by discipline but by architecture. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes, and the architecture is already available to you. The only question is whether you build it today or explain to yourself next year why you meant to and didn't get around to it. If this video gave you one number, one mechanism, one structural change you're actually going to make, subscribe, share it with one person who is also doing everything right and still feeling like the math doesn't add up. They're probably